My name is Jonathan Jacobs. I'm Director of Enrollment Research at the University of Oregon, and today I will be talking about understanding the value of a degree. There have been several articles which focus on the costs associated with a degree. Many students graduate with debt, the cost of a degree is increasing in terms of tuition and fees, and it is becoming more difficult for low-income people to afford college. Now, while these things may be happening, it is also important to understand what the benefits are of a degree, and this is something that tends to be overlooked. So in my presentation, I'll be talking a little bit about debt at graduation, as well as the value of a degree. Now, the debt at graduation for the University of Oregon is about $24,500. Now, that's a lot of money, but it's also a very misquoted number. If we look at the distribution of debt at graduation, and this is debt at graduation for 2011 and 12 graduates, let's start with the person with the least amount of debt and the person with the most amount of debt who graduate from the University of Oregon and who started as first-time freshmen. Then we'll line up all of our graduates from the person with the least amount of debt to the person with the most amount of debt. And then we will chart how much debt they have with the amount they borrowed on the y-axis. Now, the first thing I see when I look at this is for the University of Oregon, 51% of our graduates who started as first-time freshmen graduate debt-free. They don't need to pay anything back after school is over. Another 24% borrow less than $24,000. Now, it is important to note here that 75% of our graduates have less than $24,000 in debt. But here's where you find the average debt at graduation for our students. Not in the middle of the chart, but here at the 75% point, because the metric only calculates average debt for those who have any debt. So it's only looking at the 49% of students who have debt. Now let's look at the rest of our students. We have another 20% who borrow between $24,000 and $40,000. This is 95% of our students who are borrowing less than $40,000. Only 5% of our students are borrowing more than that, up to a very small number who borrow as much as $150,000 to fund their education. In statistics, we call this an outlier. It's an extreme case. It's not very common. But these are the situations which media outlets tend to find students who borrowed this much and use them as an example for why student debt is out of control. Another thing is media outlets will frequently use graduate students and use their debt, which is different because you're talking about somebody who had to borrow for a graduate degree. One other thing to mention with this data, of the students that borrowed more than $100,000 in this cohort, not a single one of them borrowed more than $40,000 from the federal government. Most of the loans were through private lenders. Now, not all institutions have as many students as the University of Oregon who graduate debt-free. We have programs like Pathway Oregon, which help low-income students pay for college. But this explains why the proportion graduating with debt is just as important as the average debt at graduation. Now that I've explained debt at graduation, I can also say that it is a flawed metric. It does not capture real economic costs or benefits to students. A question that media and students should ask is the cost of a college degree worth the value? Or are you better served getting a job right out of high school? Is it work experience that's more important? Now, if we're going to look at these questions, we need to look at US Census median individual earnings, and I use 2010 data. Now we see that a person with a bachelor's degree earns $57,000 compared to somebody with just a high school degree earns $31,000. This is on average in all age groups. Now, critics of higher education frequently say that a college graduate cannot earn that type of money right out of college, and they argue that the cost and debt of an education will offset the value of the degree. So let's actually look at that question. Are they right? For this analysis, I'll use US Census average earnings by both education and age so we can get at the difference in earning power from a younger population compared to an older population. So let's again use US Census data. We will have two hypothetical average people, one getting a job right out of high school and the other going to college. Census says that the high school graduate would only be earning $15,000 right out of high school, about minimum wage. They don't have work experience yet. A resident going to the University of Oregon would be paying $24,000 for 4 years, assuming extremely conservatively that nobody helped them pay, they did not get grants, and they did not work at all while in school. At age 22, this puts them about $150,000 in net earnings below their high school peer, the cost of their education and the lost income they could have gained from working. But there's something that's not fair in this comparison. Did the high school graduate live with their parents? Because if they did not, they would have to pay for rent, food, travel, and personal expenses, using their income to do that. Now, the cost of education has that built in. $13,000 per year, $52,000 over 4 years. So to make comparable numbers, we actually need to take that number out of the cost of education. Now, the student will still be paying for room and board while in college, but we don't account for that in the high school student. So now neither hypothetical student reflect these necessary life expenses. With this adjustment, the gap closes significantly with an opportunity cost of about $100,000 over 4 years of college. Now, as a reminder, this is conservative. It estimates no parental support, scholarships, or work income, and I'll address those at the end of my presentation. Now, it is true that a college graduate cannot earn $57,000 right out of college, but by age 25, on average, according to census data, they are earning $41,000, and that amount will rise rapidly. Before the students are 30 years old, we reach a break-even point where, on average, the additional income from a college degree results in greater net earnings, lifetime earnings, than merely a high school diploma. And now let's move forward in time. The increased earnings potential only grows larger. By the time these people are 64 years old, the person with a college degree will have earned $1 million more than the person without a college degree. Now, this is snapshot data using the US Census, and we're talking about earnings across generations, but this still reflects today's market rate at which people with degrees are being paid at all ages. This also only talks about earning potential. It does not discuss other benefits like lower unemployment rates, healthier workplace, a happier workplace, greater personal challenge in the workplace, civic engagement, the likelihood to vote, donate, volunteer, and generate social connections. All of those are much more likely for a person with a college degree. Now, there is an opportunity cost at the front end of $100,000, but I want to do a thought experiment. This one's specific to the University of Oregon. I assumed that the college graduate would not work or get scholarships. But let's create a hypothetical situation where we have a resident student who is Pell eligible with a 3.4 or above high school GPA. That student is eligible for the Pathway Oregon program, which makes sure tuition and fees are paid for. This reduces the cost of education by $40,000. Now the only costs left, since we're not including room and board in this comparison, the only costs left are books. This closes the gap significantly, but let's make one other assumption to our scenario. Let's say the student got a part-time job working 20 hours a week, $9 an hour, 50 weeks out of the year. It's about $9,000 a year. It's not a huge salary, but it helps pay for tuition and other expenses. Now, when you do this, and you look at the comparison, going to college is not a huge sacrifice after all. Now, I'm doing a comparison of an average according to US Census and comparing that to a hypothetical Pathway Oregon student who gets a part-time job. And the reason I'm doing that is to show that there are resources available for college students which do reduce the cost of education and make it much more affordable. And then the lifetime benefits of a college degree are incredible and will serve anybody of any income. That's my presentation. This is Jonathan Jacobs. Hopefully this has given you some information about the value of a college degree. Thank you.